It's truly been my privilege and deep honor to be with you this weekend. I have been looking forward to this, and I have been dreading this. God has been gracious. You have been so kind, and I'm so grateful. Is there anywhere you wouldn't go if God asks you to go there? Is there anything you wouldn't do if God asked you to do it? We live with a lot of FOMO, don't we? That fear of missing out. We want all of our options. We don't want to exclude any of them because the one we exclude might be the one that we really think we want in the end. One of the greatest lies of the tempter is you will miss out if you go God's way. But I bless the day. God gave me a fear of missing out on His plans. Be afraid to die until you have lived for God with all of your heart, mind, and soul. When we enter into this relationship with Jesus, it's so amazing. The things we see, the joys we experience, the opportunities that are afforded us that we could never have had on our own are amazing. Questions, of course, uncertainties. Peter found those we saw the other day. The way that he gives us that sense of placement and rest in Him is just beyond compare. What He does to the inner person, that feeding deeply on Him, that life that comes from Him, what a wonderful way to live. But tonight there's one more invitation I would like for you to consider with me that Jesus would extend to you. We find it in Matthew's Gospel, the last chapter of Matthew, right at the end of chapter 28. Jesus is speaking to His disciples after His resurrection, just before He will ascend into heaven. And Matthew 28, verse 16 says, "Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw Him, they worshiped Him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, or as you are going, therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.'" Most of the time when I have heard this passage or read it, the word that's jumped out to me, been especially emphasized, is that little word, go. And our God is on the move. Don't ever forget it. But I want you to think with me especially of that little word, with, tonight. Our invitation tonight from Jesus is, come and go with me. Because His mission is never to be done solo. His mission includes His enduring, abiding presence wherever you go. And if Jesus goes with us, we can go anywhere. Many times I've been to small gatherings, maybe a prayer meeting, maybe a small crowd somewhere, and kind of as a word of comfort, the scripture is quoted, well, Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered in His name, there He will be in the midst. And I have appreciated that promise, and I've clung to it. As if that when this gathering is over, so is His presence. And it's a good thing He was with us, because we would have sure been awfully lonely because there weren't many of us. But I want you to know tonight, every square inch on planet Earth and in all of creation is inhabited by the presence of God. You don't walk anywhere that he's not already there. And you can be assured that when he leads you, he is not sending you alone. He is calling you with him because he's already there and he's already going there. I speak to you tonight, perhaps some of you with an unsettled spiritual situation. I, as a teenager, had a time of rebellion, and a lot of that centered around this resistance in my heart to do what God wanted me to do. I did not know for sure if I would be a preacher, but I was told by many I would, and I resented that. Yeah, I'd just be like your dad. I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be my own man. I wanted to be my own person. And I knew to submit myself to the lordship of Christ for salvation also meant that he got to call the shots for the rest of my life. And so there was a sense in which I had to say yes to the possibility that what this yes to Jesus might mean would include a lifetime of ministry. I resisted that for a time. Maybe I speak to somebody who understands that. And you're afraid of what Jesus might ask you to do. But I can tell you on some good grounds of personal experience, the best life is with him, not without him. And whatever you have to do that he calls you to do is going to be all right. If you'll pardon me tonight, if I've understood the mind of the Lord tonight, I really am not intending to preach. I intend to share from my heart some of that journey that I have experienced, that God has allowed me to have, of him going with me. And perhaps you also would find that he uses somebody else's story to draw you into a journey of your own. When I went to Bible college, I was looking for the there and then, always excited and preparing for that day, only to come face to face with the reality that God wants me to do something in the here and now, too. And it's not just that day, but it's today that maybe, in my case, sharing a dormitory with high school students, there might be some of those that God would have me to invest in. Some college classmates and some others that God would have me be part of their journey. And I began to sense God leading me to ministry, even within the context of preparing for ministry. A dear friend of mine in college, Doug Dershide, and I one day were just burning in heart for doing something for God. And on a Sunday afternoon, we put on our suits and ties, and we went to a local hospital. We didn't have a chaplain badge. We were not trained. We were not prepared, but we had a burning heart that said, I just want to do something for God. And so we walked up to a patient floor, knew no better than to walk right up to the nurse's station, and we said, hi, this is Doug, and I'm John. And we're just here because we care about people. And is there anybody that's having a bad day that maybe we could just pray for them today? I could still see the nurses' looks on their faces. They were so taken aback. One of them said, well, would you like to start right here? And we said, why, sure. And they got their bearings and directed us to some rooms, and we knocked on the door, walked in, just said, hey, we're just here because we care, and I don't know what kind of day you're having, but would you like us to have prayer with you? Not once were we refused. And I found that Jesus visits hospital rooms in a special way, and something happened inside of us that was just thrilling. Did we do it all right? I don't know, but we did it, right? I remember one of those Dr. Bird assignments. Anybody get any of those assignments where you have to share the gospel so many times and you have to do so many things with so many people? And I had to share that little plan of salvation, you draw it out on the card, and well, who's it going to be? Well, there's Scott. There's Scott, the guy that I work with. And so I said, Scott, I've got this assignment for class. I really would like you to be part of this if you'd be interested. And I didn't know how it would go. We practiced in class. Thank God for people like Dr. Bird, who's good at equipping us and getting you ready for some things. And so I sat down and I tried to draw this God-man chasm in between, Anybody know what I'm talking about? We're there. And I was just waiting for his response, and Scott pushed back from the desk, and he said, "Whoa, this is amazing. I have never seen anything like this." He said, "Can I have this paper?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's really for you." He said, "I'm going to take this, I'm going to tape it to my bathroom mirror, I'm going to look at it every day." I don't know whatever happened to Scott. I've lost touch with Scott a long time ago, but I know this. I got to give him the gospel at least once. And I found that in those moments, Jesus was there. And what a journey it was. I had a manager whose name was Bill in the same workplace. It pays to be honest at work. It pays to do a good job at work because all your coworkers are watching you, aren't they? Bill came to me one day. We weren't really close, but he said, "John, you're preparing to be a preacher, right?" Yeah. He said, "Brandy," which was his wife, he said, "Brandy's grandfather passed away, and we're not religious people. We don't have a preacher. We don't have a priest. Would you do the funeral?" Oh, I said, "Well, yeah, Bill, I'll do anything I can to help you." I went to meet Brandy's family the night before the funeral. We sat down, and I just said, "I'm really sorry I didn't get an opportunity to meet your grandfather. Is there maybe something you could help me to know? Or there's some things about his life you could teach me so that, when I share tomorrow, it's a little more personal?" And I am not kidding you. The only positive thing they could say was, he was a good poker player. I couldn't find a way to get that one in there somewhere, but I still remember that opportunity and the bond that I built with Bill and Brandy. They came to our wedding, and I've lost touch with them now. But I found out that Jesus goes into those dark and tough places sometimes, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. I'm thinking about some people when I first went into pastoring. I'd only been pastoring a few weeks, and the church had an established bus ministry, and all of a sudden on a Sunday morning, a man and woman showed up whose children, or some variation of one of their children, would ride our bus. And I saw them, and I thought, we probably need to have a conversation. I want to follow up with Joe and Jamie. And I went to their home that week, and I sat down at their little table, and I said, "What do you know? What's your experience? What's your background?" Not a thing. I got out my little piece of paper and I drew God and man and the gulf between and the cross that fills there. And I began to see some things click in their minds. And they didn't know how to pray. And so I said, "Well, I can lead you in a prayer if that's all right." And yeah, please do, because I don't know how to pray. And as I began to lead them, I saw tears began to fill their eyes, and these sense in both of them that something was changing, and I was so hooked. I was like, "Jesus, this is so amazing." There was a guy just down the road from the church. I was so excited that I just got the privilege of sharing the gospel. I went to this old gentleman's house, and I knocked at his door, and I said, "Hey, I met you a while back. I have something I want to show you today." And I showed him the same thing. He wasn't nearly as ready as Joe and Jamie, but there's something that caught in my heart that you say, "Jesus, if you could do that for them, you could do it for that guy down there that was such a difficult neighbor," his people told me. I got a call one day from a family in our church. Their grandson adult grandson worked in a truck repair shop. They worked on tires and a variety of things, and they said something terrible's happened to our grandson Jeremy. He was at work and he had a terrible accident, and he's in the trauma center. We don't know if he's going to live or die. And I went to find a young man who had been working with a large tire off of a truck, and it exploded, threw him across the shop floor, and head trauma. The situation was life and death. Later, they would tell me that if his coworker hadn't stuck his greasy fingers in his mouth, his airway would have closed and he'd have been gone. And I'm trying to figure out how to pastor in a traumatic situation. Hours with that family, spending time with them, praying with them, and we begin to see consciousness begin to come back to Jeremy, and eventually he begins to make the turn for the good, and eventually he gets out of those critical hours and into a regular floor, and eventually the rehab, and eventually those conversations where you say, Jeremy, you know, God's been really good to spare your life. Yeah, I know. How's your relationship with him? Long story short, I got to see the day that Jeremy and Tiff, his wife, and their little ones would come to church and give their hearts to Christ. And I found that Jesus goes into trauma units and walks with people in very dark places. And he asks us to go with him. It wasn't long into after moving to Dayton that I began to see some extremely broken people. I remember when the convention, the IH convention, was in downtown Dayton. There was a man who was attending, who was a pastor who I knew just at a distance, and he came to me and he said, I met a woman who works here at the convention center, and she's asking for prayer for her mother, and so I thought maybe I'd put you in touch with her. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. And I met Rosemary. And I found out that Rosemary lives on the East End. If you know anything about Dayton, there's different neighborhoods. The East End is notorious for trouble. Down Xenia Avenue, turn on Parrott Street, and there's where she and her family was. I entered that home that was marked with a variety of signs that this was just a tough place. Rosemary's mother lay dying in her hospital bed. It wouldn't be long until she'd be gone, and they wanted to make sure that she had peace with God. And I walked into a place that honestly felt very dark, very dark. As I stood in that room trying to prepare my mind for what I should say, how I should pray, I looked up on the wall and couldn't believe my eyes. Some of you understand this, some of you may not. There hung a Heroes of Holiness calendar. IHC for a long time would publish these Heroes of Holiness, which sketch out some of these characters from the past. And Rosemary worked at IHC, and she picked up a lot of trash, and she picked up a calendar, and there it hung in a God-forsaken house, let me tell you. Or was it? I could almost sense a wink and a nod from heaven that said, I got here before you. If Jesus leads you into a dark place like that, would you be willing to go? I may offend with this. I don't intend to be offensive, but I have sat in some places and I have thought, there is so much talent in this place, and nobody outside knows it. We're singing to ourselves, we're talking to ourselves, and just begin to burn. I pastor in Dayton, and there was that convention. And I just began opening my big mouth, and I just said, you know, we have all these choirs, we have all these groups, and we just sing to each other. And right outside the walls of this convention center are people who need hope. What if up there at 3rd and Main at the convention, or at the courthouse square, if we could just get permission to have an outdoor event, what would that be? And we got permission. And we began to hear the singing of those amazing young people. And I wish I could tell you that I was just filled with ease and peace all the way through. But let me tell you, when you step into a different territory, when you're walking into new ground, sometimes there's a hiss of the enemy's voice. What are you doing out here? All these people are dressed like they don't even recognize you. What are you doing out here? And I fought these mental battles sometimes, but I said, Jesus, we're doing this for you. And I remember one Sunday there, after that, we had an opportunity to meet some of those folks that had passed by, and they came to our church just saying, well, that music was so beautiful, it was so wonderful, I just thought I needed to hear some more. Well, they didn't hear the mass choir at our church, I'll tell you the next Sunday. But the same Jesus that we got to share with them is the same Jesus that we got to keep telling them about. And I just want to tell you tonight that if Jesus calls you to the public square, you're not going there alone. He's already there. Children that came on our bus route there in Dayton had a terrible tragedy in their family. Nobody had a church connection except those kids that rode our bus, and there was a death that happened violently. It was awful, and I was contacted, and they said, hey, these kids, their aunt passed away, and we're just wondering, would you be willing to help them with their funeral? And I said, absolutely. So we stepped into that situation. As is customary many times for a minister to stand as the final respects are paid, in that family, people are walking by. The woman who had passed away soon would be buried, and the last look was from her husband. I can't go into the details of her death, but I remember standing in that dimly lit funeral home and hearing a string of cursing that made my blood run cold as that new widower looked at the corpse and then lifted his head and cursed violently. And there's something inside of me that just recoils from that. And I didn't want to hear that. I didn't really want to be at that moment. But I'm reminded that Jesus walks into the darkest, awful places with people who have no hope. Long story short, I ended up having 4 funerals for that same family before the first family member walked through our church doors. But the day came that Claude and Becky would come through those doors. It was Becky's sister that I had the first funeral for, and all the rest of the family members. And I'm reminded that God walks in dark places. I'm thinking about a little lady that lived on the East End. Her mentality wasn't great. Her personality was large, and you always knew she was there because she sat right on the front seat. Her name was Joanne. Joanne was a character. I mean, you do not ask a rhetorical question in church because she's going to answer it. There was a period of time while she was with us that I was needing to lead the singing because of just some folks that weren't available. And one Sunday, I was leading singing Sunday morning, and I led that song, Glorious day. Living, he loved me. Dying, he saved me. Buried, he carried my sins far away. Rising, he justified. Freely forever. One day he's coming, oh glorious day. Now, this is how Joanne would sing. She mumbled all along, wanting to catch as many words as she could. But one word she did know was day. And every time we got down to the end of that chorus, one day he's coming, oh glorious. And she gave it all she had. Day! And sometimes she made us laugh and sometimes she made us groan. But I came to realize how we treat Joanne matters to Jesus. And if Jesus can trust us with Joanne, he might trust us with somebody else too. And you have to be open for God to bring to you anybody he wants to. And Joanne was one of those. So many stories, and some of them I can't tell you. We got an invitation to sing at a drug rehab facility at Christmas time. We'd never been there at that point. We didn't know what we were getting into. We asked if we could bring cookies, which they gladly accepted. And we stepped into this place where you have people in different levels of rehab programming, and many of them knowing that they're going to be there over the Christmas holiday just is a sad, sad thing. And so we just took our people, just our people, just kids, teenagers, adults, people that are better at singing than others, just bring them all. And we began to sing. Over to my left, there was a guy who sat on the edge of his seat with rapt attention. I didn't know him, had no idea what his life had been or what it was about to be. But in that seat sat Trent Ostendorf, a man plagued with addictions, a man who had burnt every bridge in his family, so much so that nobody in his family would welcome him to stay with them. At that time, he had been married and divorced 3 times. There were so many things in his life that were wrong. Little did I know that God was opening up a relationship with that guy. He got out of his program. He went and stayed on somebody's couch for a number of weeks, and that's where we got to know Trent. Trent would later say, there was something about those people. There was something real about those people that I never saw anywhere else, and I said, I got to get me some of that. Trent's license had been revoked. His child support was behind. His life was a wreck, and we began to pray, oh, God, help Trent. I saw the first day that Trent made an honest living for a long time. He had an opportunity to do some yard work, and he came back to me, big old blisters worn on both thumbs from that long day of work. And he said, see them blisters? Them's honorable blisters. I remember the day that he would stand and testify. He always sits right down on the front seat. And if he was where he's supposed to be, he was there this morning, so hopefully he was. And I remember his testimony would sometimes go like this: I'm just glad I'm clean and sober. And some of us have no idea what that really means or what the cost of a testimony like that represents, but I began to see God clean him up and help him along the way, and got his license back. He got his family restorations established. He began to walk with God, and I've seen God change that guy. It's been my joy to watch God lead him along. And every time I serve that tattooed arm communion and I see it reach out, I'm reminded that Jesus goes to great lengths to save us. Would you be willing to go somewhere like that? There's the up and outers, there's the down and outers. It seems like God sends along sometimes some people that are really down on their luck. I got to tell you about Bobby and Christina before I finish. Bobby's grandmother lived just a couple of blocks up the street from the church. They had nowhere else to live. Bobby and Christina had not been married that long. She's a good bit older than he was, and she's not got any of her kids because they've all been taken out of her care. And they're walking down the street, arguing. Just a few blocks on the other side, the other direction, there's a group house where some of their group meetings take place. And they've been in a group meeting, and they're fussing and they're fighting on a Sunday afternoon, hot in August, and they're standing arguing right in front of a church of all places. One of our dear ladies saw this all unfolding as she was getting ready to come to the Sunday evening service. And I think she invited them in, I'm not sure, but they came in one way or the other. I walked back to them as they were seated in the sanctuary just before the service began. Never met them before in my life. And they were rough. I mean, rough. It wouldn't be polite to describe the roughness, but you can imagine. And I said, "Hi there." First thing out of Bobby's mouth is, "Does this church give altar calls?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Something you need to pray about tonight?" He said, "She does." I said, "All right, we can do that." It's time to start. I didn't have any time to talk to anybody. And after, the singing and all that, and Teresa's at the piano, and I just kind of give her that little motion, like, keep playing. She's looking at me like, okay. And I said, some of us here tonight might need prayer. You may have come with something that you need to pray about, and this altar is open. And I waited, just wondering if they would. And they did. They came and they prayed, and later Bobby would tell me some of the stuff he prayed about down there, and it was deep. It was big. One of the things he prayed about was not too awfully long before that, his dad died. And he said, "I was mad at God." He said, "As a matter of fact, I cussed God." And he told me the words he used when he cussed God. You just got to know Bobby. And he said, "I went down there and I asked him, forgive me, because I know that wasn't right." I said, "Yeah, you're right. You're right." And they began to pray, and they began to make some steps. I'd start some Bible studies with them, and we'd do a check-in on Wednesday night before the service, one Wednesday night. Man, they're running late. What is going on? It's not normal, because he normally kept his word pretty well, and he came finally in late, and he's like, "Man, I'm sorry, I'm running late." He said, "I had to change my shirt." He said, "Got in a fight with my neighbor right before we got here, and he was saying trash to my wife, and so I just can't take that. I got to put a man in his place." And he said, "We got in a fight. I had a little blood on my shirt. I didn't think I ought to wear that to church tonight, so I just took a little time to change my shirt. Sorry, I'm running late." All right, Bobby. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. And they kept walking with God, and his grandmother, Bobby's grandmother, Clara, said, "I don't know what's up with Bobby, but he put $10 in your offering." He said, "He never gives money away. Something's changed in that guy." And let me tell you, he got a long ways to go, but God's working on his heart, and it's amazing. So we start talking about baptism, and so we got a baptism class that we want to take him through, and we took Bobby and Christina through this baptism class. Part of that class is we work on our testimony, and we invite our friends and family to come to that baptism because it's such a wonderful testimony. We're working on his testimony, and he wants to tell the story about what he prayed to God about at that altar. And I said, "Bobby, that's fine, but no F-bombs in your testimony. You just can't do that. That's just not here. No. So just kind of gloss over that, like you don't have to get descript. Okay. And Bobby kept growing. I remember walking some tough roads with him. It became time to decorate for Christmas, and we often ask others that want to join us on a night at church, getting the tree set up and the manger scene and the lights, all that kind of stuff. And Bobby and Christina, they're looking for connections. They're looking for friends, and so they'll show up for anything, even decorating for Christmas. And in our foyer, there's kind of a tall ceiling. We usually have this, I think it's about a 12-foot Christmas tree that we put down there, and we gave Bobby a chance to help us. Bobby and Christina are down there decorating the Christmas tree. And Bobby gets those lights, and he just keeps going round and round, round and round and round. There's nothing symmetrical about it. It's just, and he finally gets done, and he steps back, and he said, "That's the first Christmas tree I ever decorated. And I think I did a pretty good job." I saw Christmas differently that year than I do most years. I stepped back on the stairs and took a picture of Bobby and Christina decorating a Christmas tree. Christina was very emotional that Christmas because her mama's heart still wanted to give those babies something for Christmas, but she couldn't have any contact with them. Wages of sin are high. And I was reminded that Jesus came for all of us. That was on Monday night. I said, "Hun, when you get a chance, you're going to probably want to do something with that Christmas tree. It's not quite like you'll probably want it." And so she and whoever else kind of got it, a little more like you'd expect it to be. He walks in Wednesday night. He looks at the tree. He said, "Somebody messed with my tree, didn't they?" I said, "Well, how about that? There were some people working around here." And he said, "I thought it looked pretty good." And I never saw Christmas quite the same. I did not know we would only have about 8 months with Bobby. In March of the following year, he was gone. I didn't get to talk to him the last few days of his life. I don't know. I don't know. But I know this: God's mercy pursues us to our dying breath. And I know Jesus was with him every step of the way, and I hope I get to see him again. That's the thing about relationships. They just do something to your heart. Who's going to be your Bobby? Who's going to be your Christina? I got to finish. But what I want you to know is Jesus is on the move, and he's asking you to go with him. He's got a place for you. Let me finish by telling you about my friend Jamie. Oh, there's so many others I wish I had time to tell. Let me tell you about Jerry. Jerry was from the hippie generation. By the time I got to know Jerry, he didn't have long hair, but he had all the hippie ways, He was peaceful, dude. He was just real smooth. I never really heard him raise his voice. He just kind of talked that way. And Jerry had some stories. My, did he have some stories. He's one of those long-term relationships that sometimes pastors get into. Sometimes God just gives you a little time in somebody's life, and sometimes it's an extended time, and sometimes you just keep picking up pieces and starting over again and moving on and picking up. That was kind of the way with Jerry. It was just one of those things that you just had to go for the long haul because you didn't know. And I watched God help him so many times get back up and back on the wagon and back, all that stuff. Jerry got diagnosed with cancer, and it was devastating. And so that journey took him into a little more seriousness of life, and some things began to change for him, and his decline began to be evident. In and out of hospice and in and out of the hospital and some of those things. I remember one Saturday night I visited Jerry in the hospital, and he and I got to have one of those one-on-one conversations. He had a lot of supportive family, so it was very hard to get that one-on-one time with him in the hospital, but there it was. And we knew time was getting close, that cancer was winning. That was one of the rawest, realest conversations I've ever had with Jerry. The most, I'm sure, with him. Maybe one of those with others that's the most that way. We talked through so many things. He told me things about his story that surprised me, didn't know. But he wanted to make sure everything was okay, everything was all right between him and God. And we prayed, and I left with an assurance, at least in my heart, that he's in a good place. A few days later, I had a speaking responsibility that took me away from home, and while I was away, I got the text from his wife that said, Jerry passed, and just wanted you to know. There was a hole in my heart. There was a grief in me that somebody that I'd really bonded with in those last number of days and part of the long journey with him had kind of come to an end. But in some strange way, I don't know if you'll understand this, there was a deep joy in my heart. There's almost this sense of relief. I was like, Jerry is safe. He's not going to have a bad weekend again. He's not going to fall off the wagon again. He's not going to go across the Stewart Street Bridge again to get what he shouldn't get and live to regret it. Jerry's with Jesus. And there's something deep in my heart that just said, yes, yes. Our musicians are coming tonight, and it occurs to me. One of the things that Jesus wants you to do is walk that journey with somebody as long as he has you in their life. It might be a Scot that you work with for a short time. It might be a person who's on their deathbed. It might be somebody that you have to be part of a long-term relationship where you have to keep on helping pick them up and move them on. But those sacred steps, I wouldn't trade a thing for them. To walk that last mile of the way with them and to see them home. And I can almost hear Jesus saying, thank you, I'll take it from here. Jesus has called us this week to get some things fixed inside of us, hasn't he? Because he's not just interested in you, he's interested in the people that you will touch. And he's saying, as you go to work and as you go to school and as you live and labor, There's a circle of influence that you are to lead, and you are to serve, and you are to tell. And would you be willing to walk with them? And if necessary, walk some dark paths and help them home. There is no greater joy, my friends, than knowing you are with Jesus doing what he's put you on planet Earth to do. That may not look like it looks for me, but there's a place for you to fill. There's a job for you to do. There's a life for you to live. And Jesus says, would you come and go with me? And I say again, be afraid to die until you have lived to the full for Jesus Christ. I'd like you to stand. We're going to be singing in just a moment. But this is an invitation again. If there's somebody tonight that says, I hear that call, I need to do something about that. You need to talk to God, we've got time to do that. Sing if you would, please.